Welcome to the bonfire, unkindled one.
Hey everyone, it's Blue Lizard Jello, and welcome back to Everything Possible in Dark Souls 3. Last time we completed Irithyll of the Boreal Valley by killing Pontiff Sullyvahn, although technically there are still a few areas left to explore, but we will leave those for a future video. Today we're going to be delving deep into the Irithyll Dungeon, a place that Siegward had mentioned when we ran into him in Irithyll. But before we leave, let's of course get our preparations out of the way. First, let's talk to Cornix and buy a particular pyromancy.
Unkindled one.
And the one that we're looking for today is the Karthus Beacon. Now we have talked about this before, but this pyromancy is a self buff that lasts for about 30 seconds, and this will give you a 7.5% damage increase as soon as you cast it. However, the way that this works is, as you continue to hit an enemy, that 7.5 damage buff can actually be increased all the way up to 15%, and it does stack with the Pontiff's right eye, which has a similar effect. Next, let's go ahead and find the Firekeeper. We do have some more souls to spend. So let's see how many times we can level.
One. Speak thine heart's desire. Very well. Then touch the darkness within me. Take.
Looks like we have enough souls for 3 levels. So we'll go ahead and put 2 points into Vigor and 1 point into Intelligence so we can use that new pyromancy we just bought, the Karthus Beacon.
Farewell, Ashen One.
And before we set off, let's take a look at the gear we're going to be using. I have the Brigand Twin Daggers upgraded to +5. The high speed should actually work very well with the Karthus Beacon and the Pontiff's right eye. I have the Pyromancy Flame for casting the Pyromancy, the Blessed Mailbreaker just for a little bit of very slow health regain, the Torch because there is a possibility of getting leeches. As for Fashion Souls, we have the Old Sage's Blindfold, Firekeeper Robe, Black Leather Gloves which I bought from Patches, and the Sellsword Trousers. For rings, I have the Karthus Milk Ring, which we will be swapping out for the Silvercat Ring for a couple of falls, the Lingering Dragon Crest Ring so we can extend the length of the Karthus Beacon, the Pontiff's Right Eye, and the Ring of the Evil Eye. Now I did choose the Ring of the Evil Eye over the Pontiff's Left Eye because there are a number of enemies that will die very quickly, and I believe we'll get more health by the number of enemies we killed versus getting health by hitting enemies rapidly. Now we do have a very full hotbar this time around, but pay attention to the video and you'll see each of these items get used at very specific times. I am also using Repair Powder, and I kind of scoffed to myself because of how many times I've mocked Repair Powder even being in this game, but you're going to see that at some point I will actually need it. And as far as my stats go, here they are. And if you want to take a closer look at any of these, go ahead and pause the video now. And of course, let's attune our new spell, the Karthus Beacon. And now let's head out. And the closest bonfire is actually the Church of Yorshka. Now I mentioned this in the last video that you can actually light the very first bonfire on the way to the Irithyll Dungeon, but since I didn't do it, I'm going to go ahead and speed the run there. Nothing to see here, but at the very least you do know exactly which way I go. And here you're going to see one of the other benefits of using the Twin Daggers is the Quick Step ability. Just inside this building and down this first staircase, there is the bonfire, and this is the one that you can absolutely light without being worried about ruining Siegward's questline or having Greirat die on you. Resting so I get my FP back, and now let's head deeper inside. Right away, standing at the top of this large staircase, we do see a couple of Irithyllian slaves. And if we look down, we don't see any other enemies yet, but trust me when I say they're there. Just below us here, there is a shiny. We will take some fall damage, so if we want that, we should equip the Silvercat Ring just to be safe. And then as soon as you start descending the stairs, the slaves are actually going to run off. There's a Fire Witch over there approaching, but here's why they ran. They expect you to chase after them and walk right into this Pontiff Knight. Luckily, a lot of us have been playing Dark Souls for a while, so we can spot a FromSoft ambush from a mile away. And this knight actually dropped the Pontiff Knight Curved Sword. We'll be taking a look at that momentarily, but first, let's deal with these slaves. Many of my attacks in this video are going to be the same combo, which is the R1 to L1. This gives me the fastest combination, which will give me the biggest damage output. The Pontiff Knight curved sword can be dropped, of course, by the Pontiff Knights that are wielding it, but it can also be purchased from Greirat after his first excursion to the Undead Settlement. While it doesn't list it here in the additional effects, when you use the weapon skill, it is a 2-hit combo, and the second hit will inflict frost damage. Now at this point, I'm not going to take on the Fire Witch from this angle. Instead, I'm going to equip the Silvercat ring and drop down, pick up our rusted gold coin, and now we're going to drop down again. But before we actually take on the Fire Witch, there are a couple of Irithyllian slaves directly underneath. As soon as I hit, let's put on the Karthus milk ring again. Deal with one slave here. You can see the eyes of the second. And he is done. Don't forget to grab your large Titanite shard, and now we can go deal with this Fire Witch. One of the nice things about daggers is that even though their damage up front is very low, they do work extremely well with things like the Karthus beacon and the Pontiff rings because of how quickly you can attack. Also, any enemy that can be staggered in a single hit will be stun locked because of the rapid combos. Just like that. From here, we're going to be heading through this archway, and just be warned that as soon as you start descending a little bit further, you're going to be greeted by a somewhat familiar message. Checking out this dead end here, and we've been invaded by Dark Spirit Alva, Seeker of the Spurned. Now, we've never met Alva before, but we did get his armor in Dark Souls 2, and now we actually get to meet the man behind the mask. As you can see, just like any other red NPC invader, he is susceptible to alluring skulls. And I did want to touch on something that I mentioned yesterday about Creighton. I had said that he wouldn't invade if you're offline. Now, I did some further testing, and it would appear that because I'm playing on PC, it actually is not because my game was offline, it's because I had Steam offline. Now, I don't know if anyone can replicate this, but if I put Steam into offline mode, neither Alva nor Creighton will invade. But if I put Steam back into online mode and I just turn Dark Souls into offline mode, then they will invade. Kind of a strange situation, but that's what I found so far. You can see here Alva is using the Murakumo and the Arbalest, both of which can do a lot of damage very rapidly. It is a bit of a narrow walkway here, so you have to be careful about rolling off, but the same can be said about Alva. In fact, if you play your cards right and you use those alluring skulls, you can get him to run up the edge pretty easily. And as soon as he's defeated, we will get the Murakumo. This is a curved greatsword, and it can put out a lot of damage very rapidly. You can see that this requires 20 strength in order to one-hand, as well as 18 dexterity. And the Murakumo is actually a pretty solid weapon for a few different infusions. If you infuse it with Dark or Chaos, it will actually get an A scaling in both Intelligence and Faith, and if you infuse it along the Refined path, you'll get a B scaling in both Strength and Dexterity. Not a bad option at all. And now that we've killed Alva, we will be able to pick up his armor set later on in the dungeon. Speaking of dungeon, we are now officially in it. We do have a bonfire here to celebrate. Might as well rest to recover any lost health or FP. And now we're going to run into this quite often. Does not open from this side. Many of the cells and doorways in Irithyll Dungeon either open from the other side that you first encounter, or they're locked, and there are 3 different sets of keys that we'll need to pick up in order to open everything. I just showed you a sleeping hollow, and RIP headphone users. As you pick up this rusted coin, there is a scream that will echo through the cells, and this particular hollow will awaken. This is not a particularly dangerous trap because it is only a single hollow, but there are a few other instances in Irithyll Dungeon where that scream will call a lot more enemies to your location. In this unlocked cell, we do have a large Titanite shard, across from an empty cell, another empty cell here, and directly across from that, we have a locked cell. We will be doing some backtracking in this episode and the next once we've collected all the keys. And now we have our first look at the Irithyll Jailer. I'm going to be killing this one very quickly. But suffice it to say that if you watch my health bar as I fight other jailers in Irithyll Dungeon, you will notice that my max HP gets reduced just because they're looking at me. Once the lantern glows red, if you're within eyesight, your max HP will be quickly drained. Their other attack can also be very dangerous because they'll actually try to attack you with the soldering iron and then follow it up with a semi-grab attack that will do a lot of damage. Once again, the game using a fading soul as a trap. Don't fall for it or else you will be pushed down to the lower section and you might be a bit unprepared for it. My rule of thumb is if there are any enemies in a cell, whether or not that cell is closed, I will deal with them before I go on. I highly encourage you to do the same. Here we have another jailer here, but what I'm going to do is before I rush out and attack him, I'm actually going to back up so I can get a view of the bridge that's directly behind him. The reason is you might have already noticed there is another jailer that is on patrol, and if we rush in, there's a good chance that we'll actually be attacked by both jailers. And when it comes to these enemies, it is best to take them on as individually as possible. Unfortunately, there's a particular room that makes that nearly impossible, and, well, I'm sure that many of you know exactly what room I'm talking about. Kill that one very quickly. This one is onto us, but that's okay. We can still fight him on our own ground, and you can see my health just starting to dip a little bit, but it can get a lot worse. Number of hollows here that we want to deal with before we even pick up that item they dropped. Some of these hollows can turn into those half hollow, half dog enemies, so just be wary. And this one was kind enough to drop the Aristocrat's Mask. Mask worn by jailers of Irithyll Dungeon. Noblemen delighted in its plump features. The jailers were among the few survivors inhabiting the Profaned Capital, later serving under Pontiff Sullyvahn. Perhaps the screams emanating from the cells helped them forget their old home. Bit of a chilling description for a pretty frightening enemy. Instead of taking that hallway just now, let's go grab this large titanite shard, which is followed immediately by yet another scream, which is why it's always good to kill all the enemies along the way. And this window is locked. We will be getting the key pretty soon here. Here's a location where we could easily drop down to where that one hollow is, but instead, let's take this hallway and head down the stairs and deal with this room full of enemies, that way it's clear. And here's where the kukris are really gonna come in very handy. Watch this lovely fail plunging attack. Excellent. Good thing the combo will tear through them very quickly. And this time we get their trousers. Not bad, 2 out of 3. And these hollows and cages would take me quite a while if I tried to kill them with my daggers, and I would take a lot of damage in the meantime. But using any sort of thrust damage like these kukris will kill them very quickly. Also, you can see here that the Ring of the Evil Eye is doing a great job at actually boosting my health. And over here, we have another locked cell. Another area that we have to remember so we can backtrack later. Killing this hollow easily enough, grabbing our large soul of a nameless soldier and pushing on. Now this is going to be a dead end, but there is an item coming up that we absolutely want to get because I think it's an extremely underutilized spell. But before we do that, we have a cell full of hollows, and I am going to use a charcoal pine bundle to make quick work of them because all of these enemies can become the hollow slash dog leech monsters that a lot of us have seen in our nightmares. And here we actually get the old sorcerer armor set, and I foolishly didn't even look at the item description. It doesn't say a whole lot, but this armor set is the traditional attire of anyone attending the Vinheim Dragon School. We remember these creatures from the moat just outside of the Cathedral of the Deep. Instead of even opening that door, I'm just going to stand back and hurl black fire bombs till he's dead. And as soon as he's down, he'll grant us the great magic shield sorcery. Only sorcerer swordsmen with special duties are permitted the use of this spell, which temporarily grants even the smallest of shields fortitude more akin to that of Great Shield. And at only 18 intelligence, this sorcery is highly underutilized because the description is not far off. When you cast this sorcery on a shield, you will gain 45 stability to that shield, and all absorptions will be raised to 100%. That means no damage is actually going to come through, even if you're using something like the buckler or the target shield. It'll last 30 seconds, 40 if you're using the Lingering Dragon Crest Ring, and it's something that I think a lot more builds could actually use very effectively. Now we've gone back up the stairs and across the bridge. And now we're going to head down here. I'm going to quickly deal with this jailer. You'll see my health go down fairly rapidly there in the beginning until I start attacking. Now a few hollows are going to join us, but they're going to go down very easily. And inside, we get another large Titanite shard. There are quite a few in Irithyll Dungeon. And over here, you can see that there is a hole in the wall, and that is actually going to be the way forward, but I just wanted to see that unfortunately, yes, this door does not open from this side. Get used to seeing that. But if we come through here, immediately we'll get 2 Pale Pine Resins. This is a weapon buff resin that will give you 90 magic damage on your weapon for 60 seconds. The description actually talks about this being a blood red substance, and if I had to guess, I would say that it's actually a byproduct of this creature right here. This is a wretch, and as you can see, there are some partial wings and even the beginnings of a tail, and it appears that these are actually failed dragon experiments. We're going to learn more about that, especially once we meet the boss known as Oceros. Even though this creature is neutral, I just can't stand to see him like that. He really looks like he needs to be put out of his misery. And we're going to see more of his friends, and they're less neutral. Inside this doorway, we can go right, which is the way forward, but first, let's open this door. Handy little shortcut now. And then further down here, we do have an unlocked cell. And inside is a very important item, our very first key. This is the Jailbreaker's key, which will open that locked window we saw right at the beginning. Just taking a quick look down, always good to scout your surroundings. Now let's get ready to tackle this next room, which should be the most challenging yet. I'm gonna get black fire bombs, and you'll see why in a moment. But if we actually go back to the top and look around, we can see 1, 2, and 3 jailers. Now if you're careful, it is possible to pull one at a time, and I'll show you exactly how to do that right here. First, get a plunging attack, then a rapid combo to take care of him. Now you can see that even though the other one did spew their gas, as long as I walk carefully, I will only get his attention, and now I can run to the top of the stairs, even though I am going to lose a bit of health in the process. But now, this is the beauty of the Black Firebomb. Black Firebombs are one of the few combustible items in this game that will actually cause the jailers to be knocked to the ground, allowing you to run up and do a very quick combo to finish them off. It can be very helpful if you happen to find them in groups. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Now with this one completely turning away from us, easy to get a backstab, and then follow it up with a quick combo. Couple more caged hollows here. One on that side, and one on the other. Now coming down here, yep, you guessed it. Not from this side, it doesn't. So many. And we have a crystal lizard directly ahead, but I'm actually going to attack him from the other side. Inside here we have another wretch. This one is armed and dangerous. So let's get around to the side and then just wombo combo him to death. Once again, you gotta imagine that they're asking for it. And he was guarding a simple gem, our very first. In order to use the simple gem with Andre, he does need to have the giant's coal, which he doesn't have yet. When you infuse a weapon along the simple path, it will split the damage between physical and magic, and it will gain intelligence scaling. This is actually really not that important because there are better magical infusions. The claim to fame, however, is that just like the blessed weapon, this will casually restore one of your attributes. In this case, it's the focus points. So as long as you have a weapon on your person and it's equipped that's been infused along the simple path, your FP will constantly restore, albeit pretty slowly. Now this used to be a lot more important before Regulation 1.08 because before then, any weapon skill could be cast with just a single FP. Unfortunately, that has been patched. Now as I said, we're going to get that crystal lizard from the other side, so we're heading back across the bridge again. And now we can open this window. Dropping down, we can see the Profaned Capital further below. One more drop here, and on this corpse, we get the Bellowing Dragon Crest Ring. A special ring given to those who are deemed fit to undertake the journey of discovery in Vinheim, home of sorcery. Apropos to the Dragon School, the seal depicts an everlasting dragon. A bellowing dragon symbolizes the true nature of the consummate sorcerer. Wearing this ring will boost your sorcery damage by 20%, and it does stack with the Young Dragon Ring. From here, we won't take fall damage if we carefully walk onto that first post and then drop down. There are a few enemies that apparently are completely oblivious to the man jumping on top of that pillar, but alright. If you're wearing the Silver Cat Ring or Spook, you can actually make it to that platform. In fact, that is a technique used by speedrunners. That will cut out a huge portion of the level. One shiny here, a couple of homeward bones, and then as soon as we come up to the top of these stairs, we'll see we're now on the other side of that crystal lizard. But before we just charge in, I am going to go very slowly so we can observe the trap that lies in wait. There is another armed wretch here, and as soon as we cross paths, we're going to want to dodge so we can get past that thrust. Just remember to corral your crystal lizards so they don't get away. And he'll drop a single Titanite scale, and that wretch is trying to come after us, but seems he got a bit lost. Peering into the room that had the 3 jailers just so you can keep making those connections. Now let's deal with him, using the combo to keep him stun locked. And there is another one in here. There are no items in here, but at this point, I feel like we're actually doing them a service. They also have a couple of weapons that they can drop depending on what they're wielding, and they're fairly rare. One is the Tailbone Spear, and the other is the Tailbone Dagger. Both the Tailbone Spear and the Dagger have a weapon skill that are unique to only them, and it's known as Unleash Dragon. The skill further suggesting that these are failed draconic experiments. But now we're back to where these trio of enemies are. Normally, I'm able to kill this one very easily before the other ones even take notice. But unfortunately for me, he fell off and did land safely. So now I just have to watch for those crossbow bolts since he is now paying attention to me. But hiding behind the pillar should provide ample coverage. Now these enemies are not particularly strong either in their offense or their defense. And just like the Undead Settlement citizens, if you roll into them, they will stagger. Although, a couple of times you might see it and it looks like they actually didn't stagger. I'm not sure if I didn't hit them hard enough or maybe they actually had some hyper armor going on, but I'll let you make the call. Every now and then, make sure to do a running R2 and hit the ground just so the enemies know you mean business. Another look at the Profaned Capital Tower, and that is our destination for today. Here we have a chest with a chain facing us, and then if we look very carefully at the seam, sure enough, it is breathing. We have a mimic, and we have a few mimics here in Irithyll Dungeon. So we're gonna do a few things. 1, hit it with an Undead Hunter Charm. 2, use the Charcoal Pine Bundle. And 3, absolutely go to town. You can see here, before he even had a chance to react, that Mimic is dead, and we get another Estus Shard. In this next hallway, and you can ignore that snoring, you can look down and you can see the unmistakable skin of another giant. But first we have a number of these denizens to deal with. And I will say that I've handled this situation much better in times past. Ideally, you actually take care of all these individuals before the crossbowmen show up, but I didn't do that, so now I have to actually beat a hasty retreat and heal up and try to actually funnel them onto the stairs. The problem is, the crossbows have quite the range, so as soon as I get to the top, yeah, I'm gonna get hit a whole bunch. From machetes, hammers, and crossbow bolts. You can also see that I am actually taking some bleed buildup, and that's because the crossbowmen in Irithyll Dungeon are using Splintering Bolt, which do cause bleed buildup. We'll be able to get those later. But now when it's just them, I should be able to deal with them fairly easily. One quick combo to this one. And one quick combo here, and a free dung pie. Never mind, this entire room has been worth it. And right there, I feel like that enemy should have staggered, but it might have actually been a case where he got some hyper armor during his swing. One last enemy, and with him down, we can grab a Soul of a Weary Warrior, and this window is actually the one we are going to drop down. But first, I want to head over here and show you the alternate way down. I'm gonna go ahead and equip the Silver Cat ring so I can skip using the ladder entirely because, I mean, who needs ladders? This door can be opened from either side, but walking out here, you can see the giant here peacefully slumbering away. And we do want to take care of him because he actually is hiding a crystal lizard. But looking down into the pit where we will inevitably fight him, there are a number of rats. And there are a lot more rats than you can even see just there. But for now, let's head back up so we can drop down that window. This is the way to actually get around the giant instead of fighting him just now. Now, just like the giant in the Cathedral of the Deep, you can actually fight him from up here. You just have to be careful with your dodges. Switching back to the Karthus Milk Ring. And before I even grab this shiny here, we're gonna peer into this hallway and get the attention of some of the rats. One down. Two and three down. And now we get the pickaxe. The pickaxe is actually a pretty decent weapon. Now you can read here that this is just another tool and was never really meant to be a weapon, but hey, anything can be a weapon if you swing it hard enough. But the interesting thing about the pickaxe is that all of the damage that it does is thrust damage, so this can actually work very well with the Leo ring, which boosts counter damage with thrust weapons. And this can be a decent strength weapon if you infuse it along the heavy path. You can actually get an ace scaling in strength that way. Approaching this hole in the wall, you will get the attention of 4 more small rats. But we'll just deal with those before we continue. Over here in this corpse, we get the Soul of a Weary Warrior, and the reason I'm starting to look up is this hole right here is going to be quite the bane of our existence in just a moment. And if you hear that little chirp, and if you hear that chirping sound, you might know what's waiting up there. Couple of chests here, one with the chain curled around back, and one with the chain pointing towards us, so we know this is a mimic. Let's go ahead and deal with the mimic first. This time, let's use Karthus Beacon for a little bit more damage. Now the Undead Hunter Charm to put it to sleep. charcoal pine bundle, and combo away. This one will drop a somewhat familiar item, the Dark Clutch Ring. We've already picked up a few of the clutch rings, so there's no reason to read the item description. Suffice it to say that this will gain you 15% more dark damage at a cost of another 10% incoming physical damage. But now, once we open the real chest and grab the old cell key, a number of basilisks will actually pour in from that hole. Now, basilisks are not that dangerous when you encounter them only one or two at a time, but in such a large group, it can be very easy to become cursed and die instantly as soon as that meter builds up. So the goal here is not to fight them in a group, but instead try to pick them off one at a time. Get a couple of hits in and then back off until you can get a straggler. And get ready for a message to pop up on my screen that many of you playing Dark Souls 3 have never seen before and might have actually wondered if it was a myth. Weapon at risk. That's right, because of how often you actually use the daggers and at only 50 durability, it actually can get worn down pretty quickly. So let's just use a repair powder, and then refresh, and we're back up to 50. And that's likely the only time I'll use a repair powder in Dark Souls 3. Now at this point, I'm going to put the silver cat ring back on, and we're going to head out here to where the giant is. And instead of falling on the right side where I know all the rats are, we're going to find a safe spot on the left and drop down there so we can actually attack them from a better angle. You might have noticed that I'm leaving the menu open when I'm switching the rings because it makes it a little faster to swap them back out. And now we're going to fight some rats. And I am going to actually speed this next part up because there are actually 25 rats for you to kill in this area. There are so many that I have actually questioned whether or not they ever stop coming out of those holes. But I recommend following this guidance because you don't want to fight the giant at the same time as 25 rats. That gets very tedious very quickly. So enjoy this little rat killing montage. Number 25. Yeesh. Also, did anyone notice that a rat that dropped an item actually disappeared, just kind of right in the middle of that? That was strange. Now let's get ready to take on the giant, and we're going to fight him the exact same way as we fought the ones in the Cathedral of the Deep, albeit with a different build. And the goal is, just hug his feet. The only thing you really need to watch out for is when he does his foot slams. Anytime he's actually going to use his fist, he's going to do it out in front or to the side, so as long as we're either underneath or behind, he's not going to be able to hit us with his hands. I'll be using a charcoal pine bundle anytime I think I can get multiple hits in. Should speed up the process a little bit. I did actually test this with Carthus Rouge because the daggers can work very well at inflicting bleed, but I didn't seem to be able to get bleed to proc on the giant. I don't know if they're immune or just have incredibly high resistances, or maybe I just didn't notice him bleeding, but he'll still go down pretty quickly. And as he dies, we can get a Titanite chunk and 4 dung pies. And now let's loot the room to get a large Titanite shard here, another large Titanite shard here, and most importantly, the Profaned Flame. The Profaned Capital was consumed by fire after Yorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder. The fire, born of the sky, is said to have incinerated naught but human flesh. This is a range area of effect splash pyromancy, and it can be really good for groups as it does deliver some decent damage. One of the interesting ways to use the Profane Flame is to actually cast it and then immediately switch to another faster spell. Because of the delayed explosion, you can actually trick your enemy into rolling right into your secondary spell. Keep in mind that this pyromancy does have one of the higher stat requirements at 25 intelligence. But what else do we have down here? We can see a shiny over here through the window. Any way to get to it? Gasp! It's Siegward! That was a fake gasp, I knew he was here.
Pardon me, I was absorbed in thought. Oh, look at me, trapped like a rat. But you needn't worry. I've just been sitting here weighing my options. The moment has almost come. I just need a bit more time. My liberation requires a key. But the key is outside. A riddle for the ages.
I've actually already taken the liberty of finding the key. I could probably pass it through the bars if the game would let me. But yes, the old cell key is required in order to rescue Siegward, and we'll have to get to him a little bit later. But for now, let's take this elevator up and get a very welcome shortcut all the way back to the very first bonfire. Anytime you've been traveling this far and you've killed this many enemies, having a shortcut that loops all the way back to the beginning, also known as a Skyrim shortcut, can be very appreciated. But now let's head back because there is another section off of that giant area that we want to explore before we actually push forward into one of the most dangerous and terrifying rooms in Dark Souls 3, at least in my opinion. Sending the elevator back up, never a bad idea. If we happen to die, we will spawn at that first bonfire and have a very quick shortcut back. We have another chest, and let's take a look. Sure enough, chain facing us. So let's do what we do. This fight didn't go quite as planned, and not nearly as well as the other mimic fights, and the reason is I was only using the dagger in one hand. So instead of doing my fast combos, I was just occasionally hitting him with a very soft and gentle R1. This gave me the opportunity to stand up, so now I do have to fight him the old-fashioned way. I could use another Undead Hunter Charm, but I'm being stingy. And he drops 10 Dragon Slayer lightning arrows, which really, at this point, is not that great of a reward, because as we saw previously, Greirat now sells these. Now we can climb this extremely long ladder, hop outside, and now we're directly above where the giant was resting his sweet narcoleptic head. And I'm going to equip the silver cat ring just in case I miss the jump, but also because we're going to be dropping down eventually anyway. Directly across on this balcony, we do have 9 lightning bolts, another item that Greirat now sells. And as soon as we hit the ground here, we're going to charge this crystal lizard because he's going to do the same. Killing him will net you another Titanite chunk. And don't miss the corpse over here. This does have a soul of a crestfallen knight worth 10,000 souls. Once again, skipping the ladder altogether because who needs it when you have a silver cat ring? Speaking of which, swapping back to the Karthus milk ring. And now we're finally going to head into that broken wall on the right-hand side. And inside here, we don't have any small rats anymore, but we do have a pair of the larger rats. Still, not too difficult to deal with because they do stun with every hit. So I'll just use this tunnel as a natural bottleneck and kill one, and now we can head out and very easily deal with the second. And what is our treasure? 4 dung pies. Not too shabby. And now, there's this room. While I haven't taken any official surveys or polls, I would have to venture a guess that this room is one of the most dreaded for any Dark Souls 3 players. And you can probably see why. We have jailers as far as the eye can see, but I'm going to show you how I deal with them. But first, let's head up these stairs, grab some very interesting items, and unlock another shortcut. A great distance away, we can see some buildings up in the mountain. Perhaps we'll go there one day. We'll see. Maybe if you're good. Did I just encourage anyone watching to behave? Anyway, you can see the shiny on this statue here, and if we pillage the remains, we'll get the Dragon Torso Stone. This item, which can be put on your hotbar, reads as follows. Stone imbued with the power of the everlasting dragons, used in a secret rite by dragon worshippers. From ancient times, the path of dragon worship was walked by warriors. It is said they envision Archdragon Peak in the depths of their meditation, and at times, they even hear the distant sound of the great bell at the peak. In order to use this item, you do have to remove all of your armor, and it does last until you die. Once it's activated and you reactivate it, it will boost your attack by 10% for 5 seconds, and it causes a small force-like effect that can actually knock some enemies over. There is an upgraded version, but we won't be seeing that for quite some time. Through this doorway, we have another elevator. And if you look directly behind as you're going up, you can see a shiny in the window. We'll get that on the way down. We have a large soul of a nameless soldier here, and now we can open this one door that was previously locked from the other side. And to give you an idea of where we are, that doorway right there is actually where you enter Irithyll Dungeon. So you just have to go through there, turn right, across the bridge, turn left, drop down, and here you are. But just to give you a bit of a better perspective, once again, here's the room that had those 3 jailers in it. Let's head back to the elevator, putting the silver cap ring on just in case. And now we have the Lightning Blade, another item related to dragons. Miracle allegedly wielded by a certain Dragon Slayer knight in the Age of Gods. Tales of Dragon Slayers are now a rare thing, told only in fragments and whispers in remote regions. Who could this have belonged to? I have a couple different theories that I haven't settled on, but I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments, and we'll have a good lore discussion down there. As can be expected, this is a weapon buff that will add lightning damage to your weapon. The amount of lightning damage that it adds to your weapon scales with the spell buff of either the chime or talisman used to cast it. This does take 30 faith in order to cast, so definitely a spell that is more focused on the faith builds, and it'll last for 60 seconds, 80 seconds if you're using the Lingering Dragon Crest Ring. Just like I did with the other elevator, I will send this one back up before we proceed. Definitely a good idea here because this next room, this can cause some deaths. Very easily, very quickly. There are a couple different ways of handling it. One, you can just run past them and go to the Profaned Capital and forget this room ever existed, but there is some good loot and even an NPC in here, so you might not want to do that. The other thing is you can hang around these stairs until you get 1, maybe 2 attention at a time. Let's see how many I can get. Looks like they're looking this way. Okay, finally, we got 1. So now we'll just head back into the room where we fought the giant rats and hide behind this pillar. And then attack as soon as they're within range. Easy enough for that one. Let's see if we can do that again. I'll use a kukri to definitely get his attention. And this guy actually lost interest, and you could also see the light change, which means that if he saw me, my life wouldn't keep draining. Okay, it worked a second time, but now let's try something completely different. We're actually going to sprint past all of these jailers, because over here on the right-hand side, there is a cell with a special guest. One of the crucifixion beasts from the Crucifixion Woods. And this enemy, even though he wants us dead, he wants anything dead that's in his way. So if we actually let him loose, he can actually take care of some of these jailers for us. Not really seeing him do a whole lot. Well, there's some damage. This unfortunately is like the mimic just outside of the demon ruins that can help you fight the fire demon. Your mileage may vary. He might single-handedly kill the fire demon for you, he might lose interest and focus on you, or he just might get killed. Sadly, it looks like that enemy lost interest after killing only one jailer. Guess it's better than nothing, he said questionably. So it looks like we'll actually have to try to divide and conquer these jailers. You can see my health got extremely low there. As it starts populating, I will use an Estus flask, but not before I accidentally throw another kukri. That's the problem with having this many items on my hotbar. Another one down. And we will loot this entire room once all of the jailers are dead. Leaving any of them alive and looting is really not a good idea. Getting the black fire bombs ready can prove very useful, especially if you get the attention of more than one. Or if you just want to throw it to the side and give them just a little fright. We're nearly done here. Get the backstab and then finish that one very quickly. Watch out for that stabbing motion. If you get hit by that soldering iron, it does reduce your maximum equipment load, which means that if you're close to that 70% cap, you might start fat rolling. Here's the single jailer that this enemy managed to kill, and look, they didn't even touch him. He actually just went back to his cell of his own accord. I've actually never seen that happen. Oh well, let's deal with him. Once again, fairly easy to stun lock. And he dropped a Titanite shard. Hooray. And now we can loot. Large Titanite shard here. And then over here, hiding behind these jars, we have Alva's armor set. This has a pretty interesting item description. To this day, troubadours sing of tales of the wandering knight Alva and his travels, and of his involvement with the saint and the witch. Needless to say, the songs traditionally end in tragedy. Back in Dark Souls 2, if you purchased the Alva set from Mullen the Armorsmith, it would actually talk about Saint Sarada, a saint who was very sick and Alva was actually seeking a cure. Now the witch that's mentioned here, it could actually be Carla, the NPC that even though we haven't met yet, we are going to rescue just as soon as we get the key, and we'll see here in just a minute. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the room where the crucifixion beast was. Sadly, very little to see. Large room with nothing in it. Not even an enemy who would help us kill our other enemies. He was borderly useless. But inside this room right here, a locked cell I'm afraid, you can see the NPC back in that right hand corner, and that is Carla. She is the witch, the pyromancer that we've been talking about, the one that we can actually give those dark tomes to and some of the pyromancy tomes. But until we have her key, she will remain locked up. But we do have an unlocked cell over here, and on the first corpse, we get the Xanthus Ashes. Umbral ash of a sorcerer who explored the golden sorceries of a long-lost land. They were called Xanthus scholars, but some foolishly imitate them by simply dressing in yellow. Well, Xanthus actually does mean yellow, so it's not that foolish. When you give this to the Shrine Handmaid, you'll unlock the Xanthus armor set, minus the headpiece, which we've already gotten from Hazel, as well as the Young White Branch, Gold Pine Bundle, and the Gold Pine Resin. Sorry for the lack of warming on that screen as you pick up the Dust Crown Ring, but now that the enemies are dead, we don't actually have to worry about it. Leaf-colored crown ring bestowed upon the Princess of Ulasil, ancient land of golden sorceries. Ulasil is synonymous for its lost sorceries, of which the Xanthus sorcerers are dedicated scholars. This crown ring is a rare artifact of great magic heritage. When you wear the Dust Crown Ring, it will reduce your spell focus point usage by 25%, which is pretty good, but at the same time, your maximum hit points will be reduced by 20%. So quite a bit of a trade-off. Not even looking at the chain, I know that we have yet another mimic here. Let's go ahead and prepare as we have previously. And he will drop for us a pair of Titanite scales. We might actually be able to start upgrading a boss weapon. And inside this long room, we have a number of these wretches, and we're going to kill them one at a time. Fortunately, this next pair can be difficult to pull separate, so instead I'll just take them at the same time, considering they do stagger fairly easily. I also prefer to fight them from the side and fight them unlocked. They have a much larger target from the side, so it's a lot easier not to miss. Before I loot that corpse, there are 2 more wretches. Now, not only can they drop their weapons, but they can also drop simple gems as well as the pale pine resin, which again leaves me to believe that they're actually the source of the pale pine resin. Maybe even their blood. It would stand to reason. We did have sticky white stuff that came from slugs back in Demon Souls. And here we have the Profaned Coal. Remnants of the fire that burned down the Profaned Capital preserved in an icy skull. Handing this into Andre will unlock the Dark, Blood, and Hollow infusions. And with that, we are nearly done with Irithyll Dungeon. This room is now clear, so let's head forward. We just have one more enemy in between us and the next bonfire. I am going to prepare the hotbar just a little bit, swapping out the charcoal pine bundle for the gold pine bundle, as well as getting rid of anything I don't need, because this enemy can be tough, especially with a dagger build. And this enemy, if you look up and to the right, is just waiting on the wall for us. Here we are in the Profaned Capital, and here we are getting ready to run away from the Profaned Capital, and the gargoyle that's apparently guarding it. This fight, much like one of the mimic fights, doesn't go very well, because I again forget to actually two-hand the daggers. Instead, I just use the very light tapping of the R1, which is a shame because with the R1 to L1 combos, he does stagger pretty easily. You can see here I still haven't realized my mistake. And there we go, I finally realized it. Bit too late, I might add, since I've already used 3 of the gold pine bundles. Occasionally he will shield with his wing, and you do have to be careful because he can follow it up with a wing bash and then a sweeping spear swipe. But that does function like a shield, and you can break his guard. We're going to be fighting a few of the gargoyles here in the Profaned Capital as well as later on, and you can get their weapons. They're actually a decent weapon, even though they are split damage between fire and physical, but they do have some really great range. It's almost dead here. Just gotta watch out when he puts his wings up. And he is dead. Didn't drop his weapon for us, and that's just fine. Before we go and grab that next bonfire, let's head over here, get a large soul of a weary warrior. But now, the next bonfire is ours. But not before we see a familiar face and have to stop and pay tribute. It's not often that I get quiet and solemn while playing Dark Souls, but unfortunately this is such a time. You can see the shiny on a corpse, but this corpse is actually not a nameless, faceless, hollow corpse. Zooming in, we can see this corpse surrounded by ladders and treasure is none other than our dear friend, Laddersmith Gilligan. But anyway, he has some really good loot on him, including the stretch out gesture and an undead bone shard. Definitely worth looting. Rest in peace, Gilligan. You died doing what you loved, setting up ladders and stealing treasure. But that is it for Irithyll Dungeon. That is until we get some more keys and can do some backtracking. So let's head back to Firelink Shrine. First things first, let's burn this undead bone shard. Now with the shrine handmade, we do have 2 sets of ashes to give since I never gave her the excrement covered ashes.
Gracious.
That laugh will never get old.
Gracious.
And we've now unlocked the blue bug pellet, blooming purple moss clump, dung pie, and stock dung pies with the excrement covered ashes. And we have the gold pine bundle, gold pine resin, the xanthus set, and I don't show it, but the young white branches are now available as well since we turned in these xanthus ashes.
Ashen 1.
And now with Andre. Before we hand him the coal, let's go ahead and upgrade our Estus flask. And now the profane coal.
Lords, where did you happen upon this coal? This is much too dark. I see the abyss in it. Yet a smith I remain. I won't turn down a request. But forget not, your fight is for the flame and for your fellow kin, just like mine. A cursed fate this may be, but hope remains, does it not? Prithee, be careful. I don't want to see my work squandered.
Andre sees the abyss and the profane coal. Very interesting. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this episode of Everything Possible in Dark Souls 3. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave me a comment and let me know what you learned. And if I missed something, you have to put that in the comments so that way we can all keep learning. But I thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.